Welcome to the Oxford Happiness Project. For the past 10 years, we've been researching and writing about happiness, including 2 academic books, and we've discovered 3 previously unknown facts which are crucial for organisations trying to increase the engagement and enthusiasm of their staff. The first is that the major causes or levers for happiness and engagement are not those that are typically used in engagement programmes, so it's not surprising that most current programmes don't work. The second is that there are different types of happiness with different levers, so it's not surprising that many well-intentioned programs target the wrong type of happiness. The third is that naturally enthusiastic and indeed naturally unenthusiastic people are mostly made, not born, and anyone can be helped to increase their natural levels of happiness, enthusiasm, and their potential for engagement. For most organisations these days, engagement of their people makes a huge difference to their success. For example, people who are fully engaged exert around 50% more discretionary effort, and organisations with high levels of engagement average 18% higher productivity. But worldwide, very few people are happy in their work or engaged at work. So why is this? The main causes of high or low happiness and engagement are not those that organisations typically focus on, like company communications, working conditions, pay, vision, and so on. In fact, the 2 most important factors are my immediate leader, not someone miles up the hierarchy, but the person I see every day, and most importantly, myself, or more specifically, my own propensity for enthusiasm. So let's look at individuals and how to help them and ourselves maximise our enthusiasm, happiness, and propensity for engagement. The good news is that we can certainly help. Now, happiness, despite plenty of research, is not very well defined. In our research for the book, we discovered that there seems to be a distinct difference between active and passive types of happiness, and it's extremely important to distinguish actions or programs that might impact one or the other. A person with low levels of passive happiness could be described as sad or anxious. They would lower the overall levels of happiness and engagement in your organisation. A person with high levels of passive happiness could be seen as coping, or actually they're often described as just happy. Interestingly, you could have a person with low levels of active happiness. They would be angry or upset, and they would be positively dangerous to your organisation. A person with high levels of active happiness, most importantly, would be enthused, and this would drive high levels of engagement in the organisation. So this is the key type of happiness if we're talking about enthusiasm and engagement. And if we introduce an axis for time, we can see that ideally we'd have people who are both satisfied and committed over time. So what about this active dimension? How can we increase active enthusiasm and decrease anger and upsets? And here I'd like to reintroduce Blob and Rocket. You all know someone like Rocket, who is always enthusiastic, always sees the positive, and is always optimistic. We all also know someone like poor old Blob, who's usually pretty flat, usually sees the negative, and is most often pessimistic. And it turns out that this way of seeing the world is a style, which the person uses to interpret things that have and will happen. It's called their attribution style, and this has been researched in fields such as depression and positive psychology for many years and applied with great effect. The way it works is easy to explain. Suppose they both fail an interview. Rocket will tend to explain the cause of this using her positive attribution style. She'll explain or attribute the cause as being something that won't impact future events or other types of situations and isn't some fundamental issue with her. For example, she might think it was just a bad interviewer, or she had a cold, or perhaps the job wasn't for her. That's called a positive attribution style. Blob, on the other hand, will tend to explain it as something that affects future interviews and other situations and is probably something wrong with him. I'm not good with people, I'm unlucky, or even I'm stupid. That's called a negative attribution style. Now the good news is that this style is not mostly genetic or a fundamental part of our personality. It's a learnt behaviour from childhood and through adulthood and especially at work, and it can be relearned. So what's the point of an attribution style? We have to try and understand things that happen, especially negative things, so we know how to act in the future. Most of the time we don't actually know why things go wrong. So we develop a general theory of cause which we often deploy even when there's evidence to the contrary. So for example, if Blob had a letter saying he'd done really well, but the vacancy had been cancelled, he might still feel it's because he's stupid or something else about him. So this theory can be wrong in many situations and can drive unhelpful feelings and behaviours. So it turns out it's most useful to have a slightly inaccurately positive attribution style. And of course, sadly, this learning is self-reinforcing. If Blob goes for an interview thinking he's stupid or terrible at interviews, then he's likely to do badly. So his attribution style is reinforced for next time. If Rocket goes along thinking she's fine and last time was just a blip, then she'll likely do better, and her positive style is reinforced. And this is how the style develops from childhood through adulthood and at work. So the obvious good news is that anyone can develop a more positive attribution style and a greater propensity for enthusiasm and engagement. Now, in clinical settings, we might use cognitive behavioural therapy, which can be a long process. But for people like Blob and us, normal people, we can use much simpler and quicker reframing techniques. Involves, first of all, catch it. The person learns to recognise when they have interpreted events or predicted how future events will turn out using their style rather than on the evidence. And this applies particularly to negative events, as humans learn behaviour far more through these negative events. Secondly, check it. The person thinks about any evidence they do have. Does it suggest other interpretations of the event or future event? Thirdly, we change it. This is the most extremely powerful last step, and it's to think of at least 3 alternative explanations. So Mr. Blob could have thought, oh, well, maybe the interviewer wasn't very good, or maybe the vacancy was cancelled, or something else. Almost immediately, this very simple process will begin to modify attribution style, increase optimism and enthusiasm, and maximise the person's propensity for engagement. So it's crucial that organisations use the right lever to maximise engagement, the one with the greatest leverage. That they leverage the right kind of happiness, the active happiness that generates enthusiasm and engagement. And that they use those levers to help individuals become more enthusiastic about everything. It's great for the organisation and it's great for the people themselves. It's a win-win. Thank you very much.